terrible jokes about minorities, or, people who are, what they consider fringe or less than. All right. So these are all the things that can cause intergenerational trauma to come down. So that's one level of it. And there's like a lot of controversy, like a lot of people who don't even like psychology, or they're just not interested in that. So, they question it and think it's just like an exaggerated explanation. That's not true, but like any true scientist who studies bodies and like the mind is gonna have to like accept that this is real. Okay, so curse breakers, totally different. So like with the intergenerational trauma, what you're trying to do is unlearn all the toxic patterns that are being passed down to you. Like, let's say the family has had, generations of like diabetes or whatever, and it's from poor eating, high sugar, fats, whatever. It's like their diet. It could be a cultural consideration with the foods they're using, ingredients. So if you wanted to stop that patterning in your own children or yourself as an adult, you would just change how you obviously nutrition and exercise. I'm not going to bore you with all that. We all know that. Then those children who came after would only know that lifestyle, right? They would never know, because it's starting over. It's taking the pattern, breaking it, and starting over with a new, healthier, I don't know what you want to call it, healthier plan. But anyway, so that's the whole point of like intergenerational. You want to break the patterns, the bad behaviors, like if there's anger, if there's a lot of gossiping, if there's a lot of like the way people treat each other in the family's poor, if there's a lot of paranoia or jealousy or affairs or poor self-control or addictions. All these things can be examined. So like the 3-point series is like, you would first name the thing, then you would state how you could change it, and then you would implement the plan that you come up with to tackle it. So that's okay. So that is how you can change. And once you change that, haven't you ever heard that phrase like, this stops with you? Or like, or people will be like, if they like, let's say everybody in their family has been codependent, and like the women have never like even known how to do stuff on their own. Like they've always depended on a man, even if these relationships with men were problematic or unhealthy. And then like somebody comes along in the family, niece, daughter, sister, whatever, and she declares, I'm not going to live like that. I'm going to figure out how to do things myself. I'm going to go out of my way to learn. I'm not going to be dependent on something. If I'm with a man, it's because I want to be, because I enjoy their company, because if I want to build a life with them. It's not because I want them to do things for me that I'm perfectly capable of doing myself. I just like have been taught by like generational patterns that learned helplessness. That's the word. So that female would then be breaking the patterning. So you see what I mean? So that's all like common sense, self-help, psychology, learned behaviors, that kind of stuff. That's all that. Okay, now generational curse breakers, completely different. generational curse breakers is like, okay, on my dad's family, when I was growing up, there was just always this running joke, we would say our last name and then we would say curse, it's like, I'm not going to say my maiden last name, but it'd be like, let's say it's Jones. It would be like, oh, the Jones curse. So, and it was just a joke because there'd be like, you could like literally look back at like it is in a straight line of like like those trees they make in genealogy of like family trees. Like you could literally just be like bing, 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 bing. And it would be like all these like similar, like inherited or learned, whatever, either one or both, patterns that were like super negative, that if you looked at it just like at a glance, and you didn't know the people or you weren't part of the family, you would be like, is this like a Greek tragedy? Like, what is going on? But it's just like, with mental illnesses or addictions or, relationships maybe that were not, they maybe looked good on the outside, but in between four walls, they were probably not, people were probably not feeling accepted, appreciated, and understood. You know what I mean? So, on my mom's side, there's like just obvious, I don't know, curse pattern of, I call it the Amazon line, because basically it's like all the women in the family, either by widowhood or, the men dying early, because women always live longer anyway, or war, or people having addictions like gambling or womanizing, like the men the men being there for the women, it's almost like a complete no. I mean, the women are marrying, the women are getting in coupleships and having children, trying to have a nuclear family, but it's like, it is just like, and there's several unions that were long-term and very like healthy and amazing, but like I said, there'd be some tragic event and that person would pass away early, and then so like it's just like you don't get to be with them anyway, even if it was amazing. So like it's like what ends up happening on my mom's line is like there's just like this long line of women who have like put everything on their back and just carried it, like they've just been responsible for freaking everything. So like their mom and dad, like 100%, there's nothing these women aren't doing, okay? They're like Amazons, like I said. And no help in sight, because in those days you didn't like, go tell everybody your family business or whatever, your dirty laundry, and you would just keep things to yourself and just tackle them. So like I had one great grandmother who, she's a mail order bride. She came here. She'd had a child from some incident back home, and that child stayed with her parents to be raised. And then she came here, like I said, with a marriage to an American, but it's not somebody she knew. It was an arranged marriage. And then he was a good husband. She had 3 little girls, and then he died of like tuberculosis. And then she had to end up working during the day to make money in the home, and then well, I'm saying it backwards. At night she would work doing seamstress stuff, and then during the day she would be like at a factory job. So it's like, and these little girls had to pretty much, the oldest one, so my grandmother would have to take care of each other. Basically, they were like beyond latchkey kids, So it's like everybody in that family, learned scarcity. There was not enough money. They were wearing like homemade clothes that, grandmother like hated it. Not her family, she loved her family, but she hated, never being able to buy anything, and then, getting bullied at school for like having these homemade clothes. And, it's just like, meanwhile, the mom's working herself to the bone. And it's just like, it's just been like that. And the family line is just like women taking on like insane levels of tasks. So that would be considered like a family curse, right? And then with my dad's family, they admit it. They'd be like, yeah, this is definitely a family curse. Okay, so the generation curse breaker would be somebody probably younger in the family who would say, hello, have you noticed, these things in our family? And, people might be uncomfortable, or they may just joke around about it and they don't want to actually do anything about it. But then this person would be like, yeah, we need to like do something about this. I don't want to live like this. I don't want to have a family like this. Like, I don't want my life or my kids' lives to ever be like this. Like, this is like unacceptable. And then they're going to have a bunch of relatives, especially older ones, who are looking at them like, what, one, who the hell are you to judge any of us? And two, like, how the heck are you going to change it? Like, there's no, like, map plan. That's, like, not even, like, I've never heard of that. But that's, like, where these things can change. So, if you're in this sort of general curse breaker camp with, like, church or spirituality, or then you're thinking, actually, what I just described, even though it was, like, a curse, it's not really, like, a curse, like a spiritual curse. It's more like kind of the intergenerational trauma, just, like, wrapped up a different way. But a true curse breaker would be like, okay, this family line, like the two examples I just gave you, played with all these things, right? If you look at it from the eyes of, like, through religious eyes or through spirituality, people who believe in spiritual warfare, or they're convinced that, like, basically life is like a Star Wars movie. There's the dark force and, the force, which is supposed to be good. And then there's people who take one side or the other, and, like, everything is either, like, addiction, mental illness, like, divorces, domestic violence, child abuse, child neglect, rapes. All that would be considered evil. That would be considered the devil trying to take down your family, or like, it's just called, instead of saying these labels, you would just be like, okay, that's evil. And we all know evil, like, anybody can, like, all you have to do is crack open a history book and you're met with a million examples of evil. I mean, I think there's a million quotes by, like, famous authors who all say, look to the human nature and the human race if you want to define evil. I mean, what people do to other people is actually the most evil you'll ever witness in your life. And I'll get into malevolence, and I'll do a different video about that just by itself, because I could go on about that all day. Okay, so with generational curse breakers, you would break it by intense prayer. You would say specific prayers on a continual basis. You would try to get as many family members on board with this as possible. And you'd be constantly trying to combat through the spiritual world these forces that were trying to take down your family line, your lineage. Okay, so that is how that is completely different. It's a war between good and evil, and it's a war that you are constantly hypervigilant, focused on eliminating the whatever you think is the power of Satan or the power of evil, like, leaking into your, the crevices of your house and, like, taking people down, and then that would have to do with entities or the attachments. I mean, that's a whole other thing. So that's more like, I mean, it almost sounds paranormal, but you know what I'm saying? But there's a huge body of people, and it's just honestly just kind of becoming a trend now in a lot of religious sectors to be using this